Thank you very much. We may all be seated. Thank you to Isibane Africa Choir for the singing of the South African National Anthem and the African Union Anthem. Dumelang, good morning. Welcome to the 7th Social Justice Summit. My name is Clement Manyatela. I'm a radio and television broadcast journalist, and I'm truly honored to be your MC this morning. I'd like to take this opportunity to also acknowledge Beryl Delphine Botha, who is our sign language interpreter here with me. I would like to take this opportunity as well to acknowledge and welcome the Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa. President, welcome. And don't worry, Mr. President, I gave strict instruction to the lighting team to keep the lights very bright to avoid the trauma that happened in Washington, D.C. We have other special guests here with us, Mr. President. Minister Nkosi Mzama Buthelezi, the Minister of Public Service and Administration, Professor Thuli Madonsela, Director at the Center for Social Justice, and actually our host for this summit here today, Professor Deresh Ramjuganeth, who is the Rector and Vice Chancellor at Stellenbosch University, Dr. Nikki Newton-King, the Chair of Council and Member of Council of Social Justice Champions at Stellenbosch University, Nelson Mufu, Resident Coordinator at the United Nations, Nolita Fakude, the Chairperson at Anglo-America's South African Board. Thank you for being here with us, and thanks to all the delegates and the special guests that I may not have seen. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. As we know, the theme for this year's summit is social justice, food security, and peace, pathway to equality, solidarity, sustainability, and climate resistance. There are some important conversations that have been taking place this week at the conference, and some of you have been part of those conversations. Conversations that are intended to bridge constitutional commitments and policy outcomes, positioning food justice as a transformative driver of social cohesion, regional food security, and global solidarity. This summit is a platform for intersectoral collaboration, and thanks to the Center for Social Justice at Stellenbosch University and the partners that have made this possible for convening all the different stakeholders that we have here today. We've got policymakers, we have legislators, we've got political parties, we've got the judiciary, we've got traditional and religious leaders, civil society, the academia, and they are here to have this dialogue that is so important about food security as a cornerstone of social justice, equality, and sustainable development. Can we also appreciate just the Center for Social Justice at Stellenbosch University for convening this important summit? And thank you for leveraging the country's G20 presidency to champion the African agenda and global cooperation. We have a few housekeeping rules. I'm going to ask that we please keep our phones on silent mode. And if you need bathrooms as you exit this room, there's opposite this conference room, the bathrooms are directly there, so you'll see that as you exit. As we kick off our program, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome 3 incredible young people who will read the preamble of our Constitution and remind us of the commitments that this Constitution makes, and also our roles as custodians of this Constitution, and some of us here, our roles as executors of those constitutional values. I would like to request the 3 young ones to come through as I call their names. Abenati Nchoncho is a grade 7 learner at Ikaya Primary School. He will read in isiXhosa. Daniela Takis is a grade 9 learner at Renish High School. She will read it in English. And Christopher Kotsiembete is a grade 10 learner at Hoër School Valley, and he will be reading in Afrikaans. Let's welcome him. All right, we'll start with you, Abenati, and then Daniela and Christopher. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, sorry. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I want to say thank you to Professor Tulima Donsela for letting me to come to this stage and shine here. It's an honor to be here, and it's my first time seeing the president. Hello, Cupcake. Okay. Okay, I'm nervous because there's many people in this room, so I'm going to, yeah. Tina Bantu oh, sorry. Did I introduce myself? Oh, my name is Abenatin Chocho. I'm from Kayamandi, Stellenbosch. I go to a school named Ikaya Primary School. I'm a head boy there and Mr. Ikaya. Thina bantu baseMzantsi Afrika siyaziqonda iintswela bulungisa zexesha elidlulileyo, sibothulela umnqwazi abo baye beva ubunzima ukuze kubekho ubulungisa nenkululeko elizweni lethu. Siyabahlonela abo baye basebenzela ukwakha nokuphucula ilizwe lethu, kwaye sikholelwa kwelokuba uMzantsi Afrika ngowabo bonke abahlala kuwo bemanyene nangona bengafani. Ngoko ke ngabameli bethu abanyulwe ngokukhululekileyo samkela lo mgaqo-siseko njengomthetho owongamileyo weRiphabhlikhi. Ukuze kungcibeke imisansa yexesha elidlulileyo, kwakheke noluntu lwentando yesininzi. Ubulungisa basentlalweni namalungelo oluntu asisiseko. Kwandlalwe iziseko zoluntu lwentando yesininzi nolukhululekileyo apho urhulumente engowentando yabantu kwaye ummi ngamnye ekhuselwe ngumthetho ngokulinganayo nabanye. Kuphuculwe umgangatho wobomi wabo bonke abemi, kukhululwe nomntu ngamnye afikelele kwelona nqanaba anokufikelela kulo lobuchule bakhe. Kananjalo kwakhiwe uMzantsi Afrika omanyeneyo wentando yesininzi, okwaziyo ukuthabatha indawo yawo, onelungelelayo njengelizwe elizimeleyo kusapho phakathi kwamanye amazwe. Ngamana uThixo angabakhusela abantu bakowethu. Nkosi sikeleli Afrika, Morena Buruka Sitjhaba sa heso. God bless South Africa, Mudzimu Fatusetsa Africa, Hosi Katekisa Africa. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniela Takis, and I'm grade 8 in Renish Girls High School, and I'll be reading the English version. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people, and every citizen is equally protected by law. Improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person, and build a united and democratic South Africa, able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people.
Good morning. I'm Christopher Kutsiembete from High School Parofalei, and I'm going to be reading the Afrikaans version. Ons, die mense van Suid-Afrika, erken die ongeregtighede van ons verlede. Huldig diegene wat vir geregtigheid en vryheid in ons land geveg het. Respekteer diegene wat hulle beywer het om ons land op te bou en te ontwikkel. En glo dat Suid-Afrika behoort aan almal wat daarin woon. Verenig ons verskeidenheid. Daarom neem ons deur ons vry verkose verteenwoordigers hierdie grondwet aan as die hoogste reg van die Republiek. Ten einde die verdeeldheid van die verlede te heel en 'n samelewing gegrond op demokratiese waardes, maatskaplike en geregtigheid en basiese mensregte te skep. Die grondslag te lê vir 'n demokratiese en oop samelewing waarin regering gegrondves is op die wil van die bevolking en elke burger gelyk deur die reg beskerm word. Die lewensgehalte van alle burgers te verhoog en die potensiaal van elke mens te ontsluit. En 'n verenigde en demokratiese Suid-Afrika te bou wat sy regmatige plek as 'n soewereine staat in die gemeenskap van nasies kan inneem. Mag God ons mense beskerm. Nkosi sikeleli i-Afrika. Morone boloko sichaba saisu. God seën Suid-Afrika. God bless South Africa. Mudzimo fatutsetsa Afrika. Hosi katekiza Afrika. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much, Abenati, Daniela, and Christopher, and Professor Matansela. Thank you for making these bright young people shine here today. There's something you're going to hear a lot today during the summit. The Musa Plan for Social Justice is going to be referenced a lot. And it's something that seeks to catalyze the ending of poverty and breaking the back of structural inequality by 2030, which is in support and in line with our National Development Plan, Agenda 2063, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So I'd like us to fix our eyes on our screens now as we watch a video about this Musa Plan for Social Justice.
Despite a clear constitutional commitment to advance social justice, 30 years into democracy, many South Africans are still not free. Not free from hunger, not free from poverty, not free from structural inequality and systemic injustices that continue to hold them back. The Musa Plan for Social Justice is an integrated catalytic plan of action aimed at accelerating the advancement of social justice by breaking the chains of poverty and inequality by 2030. It is a commitment to ensure that no one remains trapped in the circumstances of their birth. For too long, we failed to translate many of the promises we made to ourselves in the Constitution into reality. The Musa Plan seeks to change that. The multi-pronged approach involving policy reform, social accountability, resource mobilization, building state capacity, and strengthen democratic leadership. We need all hands on deck. The Musa Plan is about leveraging data, ensuring that policies are not one size fits all, but tailored to the needs of all, including poor people, women, people with disabilities, children, and rural communities. If we don't deal with poverty and inequality now, it will only get worse. And that poses a real threat to our democracy, the economy, and peace. The plan also focuses on building bridges between communities, healing divisions of the past. It's about creating real opportunities for social mobility for all while ensuring that the future is different from the past. We need you. Join hands with us to make this vision a reality. Together, we can accelerate the fight against poverty and inequality. Join us in the Musa Plan for Social Justice. Together, we will change the trajectory of this nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we also have in our midst the man who's hosting us in this beautiful province of the Western Cape, Premier Alan Winde. Thank you for also being here with us. I'd like to take this opportunity now to welcome the woman who is hosting us at this summit, the woman who's also making us shine, the director at the Center for Social Justice and Law Trust Research on Social Justice at Stellenbosch University. Please help me welcome Professor Tuli Madonsela, who will help anchor this summit.
Good morning, esteemed colleagues and guests. Please allow me to extend a special greeting and extension of gratitude to our President, His Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa. Mr. President, we not only grateful you are here. If I'm speaking for my team and all the members of the organizing committee, we are elated. Allow me also, esteemed guests, to extend a special greeting and gratitude to our Premier, who's one of my favorite premiers in the country. No politics, Mr. President. Yeah, one of my favorite presidents too. And of course, please also allow me to extend a special greeting to Mr. Nelson Mufo, representing the United Nations, who has embraced fully what we are doing on social justice, hunger, food security, and peace. Lastly but not least, my special greeting goes to all of the ministers and deputy ministers here today, and ultimately the people who have made it possible for the Center for Social Justice to exist, for it to make the humble impact it's making together with you in the pursuit of shared humanity, Ubuntu, and ultimately our sustainable existence as human beings. Their representatives, the representatives of that institution, which is Stellenbosch University, are Professor Diresh Ramjugannath, our recently minted our recently minted Vice Chancellor. and our enduring and courageous Chair of Council, Dr. Nikki Newton-King. Mr. President and esteemed colleagues, we just saw this morning the protocol of the Gen Z generation. It's not our protocol. But we either reject that protocol or we respond the way our president just responded, through humility, through servant leadership, through meeting them where they are. And we thank you, Gen Z, for being who you are in this room, because now we know who you are, and you're giving us a glimpse of what are we dealing with. Because if you do these things and you behave the way you do somewhere else, we don't know what you think, and we don't know how to meet you halfway. So thank you to you too. Esteemed guests, we've just finished a 2-day conference, and at that conference, one of the stories that we discussed is what's happening in the world around peace and social justice, particularly social justice relating to food security and hunger. And the story that struck me personally is Nepal, where the protocol of Gen Z came to the fore. Within 7 days, the government was toppled and replaced with a former Chief Justice. And interestingly, as we saw this morning, they make the rules as they go. So they toppled the government. They didn't go with the normal election process. They established a Gen Z responsive electoral process because they are digital natives. And they use that process to execute a quick election process, and in that quick election process, they had a new acting prime minister, they had 2 ministers, and Mr. President and Minister Buthelezi would like you to send a message to our Minister of Finance to say he also needs to come and spend time with Gen Zs. They were very unkind to the Minister of Finance in Nepal. Very, very unkind, and I wouldn't invite that on anyone. But what was the problem in Nepal? They called themselves Youth Against Corruption. But it wasn't just corruption that was a problem. At the core of that was want in a world of plenty. What was worse was like Nepal, their constitution entrenches a promise of social justice. And even better than ours, it defines what social justice looks like, including making sure that those who were regarded as untouchables under blatantly and legally oppressive past regimes no longer experience untouchability. So in South Africa, the equivalent of untouchability was being native at some stage, being called native at some stage, being called Bantu at some stage, and I don't know what we call it now. So that was the context for the conference. And the context, Mr. President, Vice Chancellor, and Mr. Mufu, representing the United Nations, was there are 2 key things that we value that are under threat today. The first thing that is under threat today is peace. And I believe we all value it. unless we are arms dealers. The other thing that we value is the ability of our common habitat, planet Earth, to continue to host us. That is under threat. But these two threats, the conference concluded, are among the key drivers of hunger. That where there's no peace, where there's conflict, even if it's not armed conflict, as we see in the Ukraine, Gaza, Congo, etc., people still can't look after themselves. In this particular case, we understand that peace is more than the absence of war. Gender-based violence is the absence of peace. Crime undermines human security, so it is the absence of peace of any nature. That includes the crime of corruption, including state capture. So peace is a threat. Climate resilience is threatening our common habitat and is threatening and is exacerbating hunger and food insecurity. Not just in those places that are affected by climate change, but the entire world food system is affected. But just as these two exacerbate food insecurity and hunger, hunger too is a driver of conflict and ultimately war. Think of the French Revolution, think of the 2 world wars, and think of what's happening now. So, Mr. President, Mr. Mufu, Vice Chancellor, Mr. Premier, and everyone in this room, we can't thank you enough for coming to join us. Because we believe you are here because you already are laying yourselves as part of bridges of hope that will take us out of our highly, highly conflicted world into the world we had hoped for when we adopted our Constitution. By reading the preamble, esteemed guests, which we do at every event, and we've done so since 2018, and we hope you do so wherever you are. By singing the national anthem, by singing the African anthem, we remind ourselves of where are we trying to go, and how do we make sure that everything we do takes us there. So on all of these findings, we concluded that going forward, at least 3 things should be done. The first thing is understanding that hunger is not an accident of history. It is due to human action and inaction. And it's not just a moral issue, it's a legal issue and a sustainability issue. And therefore, to tackle it is not a matter for government, it's a matter for us all. And therefore, we're asking business, and we saw Woolworths saying, "Count on me," yesterday, and we thank Woolworths for that. Mr. Bakatini told us that they will support the Musa Plan for Social Justice, but also as Woolworths, they will try not to be part of the problem. And the problem is not just production of food. It is making it impossible for people to buy food because you're underpaying them, or because you overprice food, or because you poison the land where food has to be produced, and all of those things were discussed. So the first thing is a collective effort. Ethiopians say, when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. The second thing that we agreed to was there aren't enough laws, including our country. Our country is one of the highest performers on food security. We have a good constitution, we have a lot of laws, but more than that, we invest money. We are one of the highest investors in social support and social security in the whole world. But what is lacking is law that is anchored in General Comment 12 of the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. General Comment 12 requires that your system should ensure that the right to food is respected by everyone, every human being. That includes fathers paying maintenance, spouses supporting each other. So that respect is for everyone, it's not for government. General Comment 12 also requires a system that ensures that it is protected, which is then the state has to come in when food systems are poisoned, when people are underpaid, when people pay a minimum wage when they can afford a just wage, which is what Woolworths was telling us yesterday, must be done. If you can't pay a just wage, don't pay a minimum wage. A minimum wage is for those who cannot afford. So protection. The third part is fulfill the right. And this is where then the social support system kicks in. Restitutive actions in land and other places kick in to make sure that where there's already an imbalance, there is a balance. So what was the recommendation yesterday, or the resolution, is that we will want all countries to have an integrated law on food security and the right to food. But because not all countries have the capacity to develop such a law, we agreed to constitute a commission, an informal private commission, from among ourselves to draft a model law. And we're asking Mr. President, I know we didn't ask you in advance, but we're asking that because you and President Lula already integrated the issue of hunger in the G20 agenda, and I believe it's not just for your respective presidencies, it's a legacy beyond your respective presidencies. You, from our side, are the ideal champion for this model law on food security, hunger, and the right to food. So we're asking you to champion that. And it just means championing it and using G20, BRICS, the AU, and the UN spaces where your leadership has impact to champion this. So the last thing that we asked for was to end impunity. End impunity for internal violations and end impunity for violation of international law. Again, we all have to play our part. We agreed, Mr. President and honorable colleagues, that in the absence of justice, we cannot have peace. We can have an illusion of peace through the barrel of the gun, drones, and bombs. But that is not peace, and it's not sustainable. So to ensure that we have lasting peace, we should all join hands to support anti-hunger initiatives, to support climate resilience initiatives, but ultimately to ensure that wherever we are builders of hope on social justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Madonsela. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome now the Rector and Vice Chancellor at Stellenbosch University, Professor Deres Ramjuganeth, for the opening address.
Well, thank you very much, Program Director. His Excellency President Ramaphosa, Minister Buthelezi, Premier Windy, Ms. Stander, Ms. Fakuda, Mr. Mofu, Dr. Nikki Newton-King, the Chair of Council of Stellenbosch University, Professor Thuli Modensela, to all our distinguished and esteemed guests, colleagues, students, friends, as is traditionally said, all protocols observed. Good morning, everyone. It gives me an absolute pleasure, and it's my privilege as the Rector and Vice Chancellor of Stellenbosch University to welcome you this morning to the 7th Social Justice Summit. As Professor Modensela has said, there's been 2 days before this in terms of engagement and deliberations about how we take this very important issue forward, not just as a university, but as a society, as a country, as a continent, and globally. Stellenbosch University is honored to help convene the 7th Social Justice Summit. For us, this is not just a gathering. This is an accountability moment to ensure that our laws, our budgets, our institutional choices, our national choices advance human dignity and reduce inequality, poverty, and hunger. I want to acknowledge right up front the incredible work that's been done by the Center for Social Justice, and for the work that's being led in this regard by Professor Modensela. She has served this country as the public protector, and she now serves Stellenbosch University and the country through the role that she plays as the Chair for Social Justice. It epitomizes what we have as a vision for our university, for Stellenbosch University. A university that is in service of society. She epitomizes that. And so we're very proud of the work that she does together with the entire team at the Center for Social Justice. So I want to just touch on a little bit about this vision that we have for Stellenbosch University. It's called Vision 2040. It's this long-term goal, objective, about the role that we want to see the university playing in enhancing the trajectory of South Africa, about creating a society where we do not need to talk anymore about issues around inequality, poverty, high unemployment. These are the kind of issues as an institution we want to play a key role on with all of our stakeholders in addressing. That is Vision 2040. A university that is in service of society, a university that is in service of South Africa and the continent. I think there have been many questions that have been asked about the higher education sector and about universities and about the relevance of universities and how they contribute to society. And in Vision 2040, we are directly addressing that in terms of saying that as universities, it's not just about producing the graduates. It's not just about undertaking research and having research outputs and being innovative, but it's about translating that. How do we translate the work that we do as higher education institutions into, importantly, outcomes, but ultimately into impact, the kind of societal impact that we need to really enhance the trajectory of South Africa. So as we're dealing with issues of social justice, I also want to offer 3 guiding convictions. I've touched on the first one. It's about universities must be the engines of public value and public good. The truth is that producing knowledge and disseminating knowledge is just one part of what universities need to do. But knowledge matters when it moves into communities. Knowledge matters when it moves beyond the classrooms. And knowledge matters when it is utilized to develop the right kind of policies and policy implementation that improves the lives of people. And that is the role that our universities have to find themselves in. That is the role that they must play in terms of taking this country forward. The second guiding conviction: social justice is a team sport. It's a team sport because for us to have the impact that we would want to have, it means that government, business, civil society, and universities must work together. Work together in a quadruple helix model of engagement. Work together in terms of co-creating solutions with communities as partners. The third guiding conviction is we need foresight, and universities need to play that role in terms of foresight. Anticipatory impact assessments and strong evidence must inform implementation of our policies so good intentions become good outcomes. Now, with that being said, we must have, I believe, 4 concise priorities and things that we must strive for. We must strive to end student hunger. And I can tell you at Stellenbosch University, there's a number of initiatives, many of which are led by the Chair and the Center for Social Justice, where we're doing work in terms of endeavoring to ensure that there is no student hunger. We will endeavor to support a national pilot arising from the summit and that uses our campuses as a living laboratory. Success in that regard will not be measured by statements, but by meals reliably reaching students every day. The second priority is about us as an institution re-endorsing the Musa Plan for social justice. We support proactive, evidence-based policy design, modeling distributional impacts before decisions take effect. In fact, in this regard, our Policy Innovation Laboratory at the university is working very closely with the President's office in terms of how we undertake this, not just for Stellenbosch University and the region, but nationally. The third priority is about breaking the silos. It's about finding a way where we actually coordinate and integrate to get the impact and to be effective. Breaking the silos talks about working in an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, but importantly, transdisciplinary way. This is something that we are promoting and encouraging in a big way at Stellenbosch University. This is the way we're going to solve the wicked problems that we face today as a country, but also challenges that are being faced globally. So we are strengthening collaboration between all of our academic environments within the university, be it from the Faculty of Law to what's being utilized in terms of data in the School for Data Science and Computational Thinking. Bringing together the natural sciences with the humanities so that we can co-create in an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and a transdisciplinary way the solutions that we need to really enhance the trajectory of this country. We're also utilizing the latest technologies such as artificial intelligence and quantum technology in terms of the way we will undertake this and ensure that we have the success that we so desire. The fourth priority, which speaks to strengthening the relationships between the university and government, and in particular at the local government level. I think we know that if we want a successful nation in terms of addressing all of the challenges that we have, it starts by having a well-functioning local government. That's the basis for building everything else within our nation. As a university, and being a university which is very much town and gown in Stellenbosch, we are leading by example in terms of the way we work with our municipality and with the districts, but we also are opening up to all local governments and all municipalities in the country. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we signed an agreement with the eThekwini municipality on how Stellenbosch University will work in partnership with other universities to improve service delivery at local government level in the KwaZulu-Natal province. So policy meets people in municipalities. We will deepen partnerships that link things like climate, smart food systems, early warning analytics, health, transport, and safety, and circulating value locally. That is that strong emphasis on partnering with government to enhance the trajectory. These commitments as a university and in terms of what we want to do in partnership with all stakeholders in this country, these commitments align with the South Africa's National Development Plan, the African Union's Agenda 2063, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. At Stellenbosch University, we will organize our work around an agenda of enhancement. An agenda of enhancement, of enhancing Stellenbosch University as an institution that is in service to this country, enhancing the trajectory of this country so it is one that we can all be proud of and where there's prosperity for all. So as an institution, we are looking at enhancement with 3 lenses. We're looking at it with a lens of academic excellence and enhancing academic excellence because that's the sure way of translating into service for society. We are looking at a lens of partnerships and working in a quadruple helix model with all stakeholders, but also it speaks to sustainability, a holistic sustainability, not just for our institution, but for the country. But probably the most important lens that we are looking at is one of people, culture, and processes. And the issue of people, culture, and processes doesn't only necessitate enhancement at an institutional level, but also at a national level. From a people point of view, we want to create an enabling environment where our people thrive, our people flourish. As an institution, we want to produce well-rounded graduates that are critically engaged citizens and see their role as being beyond just their communities, but about really giving back broadly to society. Graduates that are ethically grounded citizens ready to build inclusive economies and caring communities. From a process point of view, we are looking at how we make evidence, open data, and rapid evaluation standards in terms of policy making and to work with government in that regard. And then from a culture point of view, it's about fostering humanity, a humanizing culture a collaborative culture, and creating a courageous ethos, willing to change course when evidence demands it. To our partners in business, you bring scale, you bring discipline, and you supply chain reach. To our government leaders, you bring constitutional mandate and policy levers. To civil society and international partners, you bring proximity, accountability, and solidarity. And to our students, you bring urgency, but importantly, you bring moral clarity to the work that we got to do. The work that we got to do, the way that we got to work in collaboration to really advance this country and to advance the continent. So today, my ask is simple of all of you. Play a role. Every one of you has an opportunity to be part of this enhancement of the trajectory. Choose one practical pathway to co-create with us over the next 12 months, to address issues and challenges that have been raised and what we've discussed over the last few days as part of the Social Justice Summit. Issues such as student hunger, issues such as a municipal climate food resilience project, and anticipatory impact assessment, or a social innovation lab connecting researchers, startups, and communities. Choose any of those. In fact, choose what you are passionate about. But the important thing is to co-create. If each of us leaves with one shared commitment out of the summit and a joint team as we work together to deliver it, I can guarantee you lives will change before we meet again in 12 months' time for the 8th Social Justice Summit. I believe in a socially just university contributing to a more peaceful world where every student learns with dignity and every community feels seen by policy. With the leaders in this room, I believe that future is within reach. So to all of you, thank you very much for your leadership, but importantly, I'm imploring, we seek your partnership. If we all come together on this, we can have the impact and we can enhance the trajectory of this country. Welcome once again. Let's roll up our sleeves, everyone, and let's get going in terms of achieving this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof, and thank you for taking a stand as an institution, for raising your hand to be part of the solution as evidenced by your Vision 2040, because as you reminded us, social justice is a team sport and needs everyone on the table, including universities. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to receive messages of support from some of our partners. I will request that they all come and they'll speak after each other. We are a bit pressed for time. I will request that you speak for 3 minutes maximum, because we are limited with time. So I'm going to call your names, and as you come up, I'm going to request, please, that you all 4 of you come sit on the podium, and then we'll speak after each other. We'll start with Renelle Stender, our partner, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Westgrow, and will be followed by Ms. Nolita Fakude, who is the Chairperson of Anglo-America's South African Management Board. Then we'll hear from Dr. Nicola Newton-King, the Chair of Council and Member of Council for Social Justice Champions at Stellenbosch University, and Nelson Mufu, who is the Resident Coordinator at the United Nations. Can we appreciate them, please?
I really need to stand on the step. Program Director, good morning, everyone. It is indeed a privilege to be here with His Excellency President Ramaphosa, Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde, Professor Madonsela, Prof. Ram Jagannath, and Nikki Newton-King, and of course, Madame Fakude, as well as colleagues from government, business, the United Nations, academia, and civil society. Prof. Ram Jagannath, thank you to Stellenbosch University for creating this space where South Africa's conscience meets its economic future. And thank you very much for publicly committing Stellenbosch University to the service of South Africa. We appreciate that. Over 7 years, this summit has reminded us that justice isn't a single event. It's a journey. It takes courage, collaboration, and care. Mr. President, thank you for keeping social justice and inclusive growth at the heart of our national agenda. You remind us that building a nation isn't about policy, it's about purpose. Premier Winde, your focus on delivery and partnerships shows that growth and justice don't compete, they move together. Professor Madonsela, your work reminds us that fairness doesn't happen by chance. It takes design and determination. Madame Fakude, I've worked with you for over a decade, and you have consistently shown that business can be a force for good. So social justice doesn't just live in our courts or classrooms. It lives in our workplaces, our boardrooms, and our markets too. Across the world, we see the same truth. Inequality threatens peace. Inclusion builds progress. From climate resilience in the Pacific to community enterprise in Africa, people are proving that justice is both the foundation and the future of sustainable growth. And here at home, we know that geography still shapes destiny. The legacy of spatial inequality runs deep from communities far from opportunity to towns, disconnected from markets. Bridging these divides isn't just good planning, it's an act of justice and an investment in our shared future. At Westgrow, we believe access to opportunity is a form of justice. When trade opens new doors, that's justice. When investment reaches communities long overlooked, that's justice too. Every day in the Western Cape, we see how partnerships between government, business, and community turns intent into impact. But the work isn't done yet. Too many families still face hunger and exclusion. Too many women are still marginalized. Justice isn't achieved through hope alone. It takes daily effort, accountability, and compassion. As South Africa leads the G20 presidency, we have a chance to build partnerships, mobilize resources, and deliver measurable change. Because growth without justice perpetuates inequality. Every investment, every trade link, every visitor must help grow not just our economy, but our shared dignity. May this summit remind us that justice is everyone's work and that we must move forward fastest when we walk together. I thank you.
Thank you, Program Director, Mr. Manyathela. Your Excellency, Mr. President Cyril Ramaphosa, Minister Buthelezi, Premier of Western Cape, Mr. Winde, and Director of the Center for Social Justice, Prof. Tulima Donsela, and can I please stand on the protocols already identified? It is a great privilege and honor to stand before you at this 7th Social Justice Summit, a platform that reminds us that our constitutional promise remains a work in progress. 31 years ago, we stepped into democracy with hearts full of joy and hope for a South Africa that would deliver a better life for all. Indeed, we have come a long way, making meaningful strides in building a more inclusive society. We've broadened access to education, healthcare, and essential social services. We've witnessed more women rising to leadership, more young people and communities actively shaping their own futures. However, yet we must acknowledge that the journey towards a better life for all is far from over. It demands that we confront an uncomfortable truth for millions of South Africans, especially among the African majority. This promise remains painfully frustrating, out of reach for too many. The gap between opportunity and reality persists, and therefore, pathways to equality, solidarity, sustainability, and climate resilience need to be supported as identified by this summit. Prof. Madonsela, we need to be resolute when it comes to delivering inclusive economic growth. We must now pursue this with equal resolve rather, as we did for our political liberation, ensuring that every South African has the means and opportunity to thrive, to live a life of dignity, purpose, and possibility. This is certainly not the work of government alone. All of us, including those of us in the private sector, must be active partners in building a more just and inclusive society. We have both a moral obligation and a shared commitment in fostering social justice. Over many decades, Anglo-American, a signatory to the United Nations Global Compact and therefore the Sustainable Development Goals, has played an active role in the socio-economic development of our country and continent, whether through transformative partnerships in education, impactful community health initiatives, or through our award-winning enterprise development program, Zimele. We continue to invest in the future sustainability of the South African society. Our purpose of reimagining mining to improve people's lives is more than a guiding statement. It is a lived commitment to ensure that the value we create extends well beyond our operations, touching communities and advancing inclusive development. We strongly believe that meaningful progress is only possible through partnerships, and that is why we work hand in hand with like-minded stakeholders to collectively contribute to building a better South Africa for all. So, Mr. President, we understand that the path to equality, solidarity, sustainability, and climate resilience is not only a matter of justice. It is a strategic investment in our collective future. In this regard, we commend the Musa Plan for Social Justice. It is a plan that represents exactly the kind of bold, systemic, and integrated thinking we need, especially because it recognizes the wicked and stubborn interconnection between poverty and inequality, and the importance of addressing both at pace. So on behalf of our organization, Anglo-American and other partners in business, I wish to express our support to the quest to achieve social justice in South Africa, and more specifically, the MOSA plan and its holistic approach to strengthening policy frameworks, mobilizing resources, fostering social accountability, and building international partnerships. Thank you.
Sort of feel like I don't know if I need this platform, but nonetheless. Mr. President, thank you for joining us today, especially at the tail end of an exhausting international visit. It is an extraordinary thing that 30 years into our democratic transition, we should be talking of food security in a country like ours, with its richness of natural resources, exceptional agricultural and retail expertise, and abundant intellectual capital. And yet, as we know, the lived reality of the most vulnerable in our nation is that hunger is not just a daily ache. It plays a key role in systemic inequality, in societal violence, and in deepening educational deficits, amongst other challenges. Food insecurity is, though, not just about these. It goes to the very heart of social justice as one of the yet-to-be-achieved aspirations of our democratic promise. It is, of course, one thing to recognize a problem, and indeed one of the wicked problems of our time, and yet another to look constructively to solutions. We would all recognize that sustained economic growth brings with it the promise of increased employment, a deep reduction in poverty, and with that dramatically reduced levels of hunger. That growth remains elusive today, and the solutions around that are, however, not today's focus. Mr. President, Prof. Madonsela speaks of social justice not being about just us, but about just outcomes for all of us. Given the systemic, cross-cutting, and urgent nature of food security, we all have roles to play in finding lasting solutions. What is needed, as we have heard a number of times already today, is a whole-of-society approach. The private sector, government, and in the context of this conference, academia, but I would also include civil society, working together in a spirit of creative collaboration and not competition. But there is a particular responsibility on those of us with relative positional levers to offer a few suggestions focused specifically on food security. As universities, we could increase partnering with peer universities here and globally, as well as with relevant private and public sector institutions to build collaborative insights and solutions to the most critical must-solve elements of food security. Prof. Ramjugannath has already commented about the need to end student hunger. For instance, at Stellenbosch University, we already provide over 800,000 meals, deeply subsidized meals a year to our 5,000 most vulnerable students. This is enabled through our own funds and through the generosity of our partners and our donors, but there's very much more that we and other universities can do and need to do. In the private sector, some retailers, as an example, are already doing enormous work, not just in their CSI space, but in their core business areas to keep food inflation low, to subsidize a critical range of products and foodstuffs so that the most economically vulnerable in our society have broader access to them. But it is worth considering whether more can be done to support sustainable agricultural production across the spectrum from mega to small-scale farmers, since the failure of a single farmer starts to influence the pricing and the availability of critical foodstuffs. It's also worth considering whether there are better and more cost-effective ways to provide high nutritional, low-priced food to the most excluded members of our society. And it's worth considering whether there are systemic solutions to the distribution of food products which would otherwise be consigned to waste or landfills. And government, of course, has a key role to play, Mr. President, where the private sector and civil society are simply not appropriate to act. For instance, clear and urgent leadership is required around animal disease control and vaccinations, since outbreaks of disease impact supply and price of key proteins, as does the slow compensation of farmers who have to take dramatic action as a result of disease control protocols. Government can consider providing incentives for research in this space. Government has a critical role in ensuring that appropriate infrastructure is working cost-effectively and reliably so that food can be distributed in an appropriate manner. And I know this is part of your cabinet agenda, Mr. President, and we are strongly supportive of it. And finally, since this is a conference hosted by a university, I hope, Mr. President, you will understand me raising the need to resolve the NSFAS funding issues. Our students are suffering. Our students are suffering because the money that they have been promised is not being paid to them, and the funding available to them, to students in the future, is simply not there. The funding models are going to need to change, hard decisions need to be taken, and Mr. President, they are for the Cabinet to take. So we all have a vested interest in a socially cohesive society where social justice is at the center of everyday life. Your private, your academic, your civil society stakeholders, Mr. President, all do a tremendous amount, well beyond their usual remit to this end, and there's obviously more for us all to do. But when all is said and done, Mr. President, your leadership on these issues sets the pace. Your leadership sets the North Star. Government needs to act with urgency in this space. You need to get a few of the big things right fast. We wish you strength in this. We're most willing to work with you and your team and our other universities and stakeholders to build faster solutions in this space. I'm sure you will find similar sentiments from all of your stakeholders, Mr. President. We thank you for honoring us with your presence today.
Thank you so much to the Program Director, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, Honorable Premier, Prof. Tuli, and Director, all distinguished ministers, colleagues in the audience. Let me ride on existing protocol, with your permission. And as we commemorate International Day for the Eradication of Poverty today, it is an honor to join you at this summit and to also acknowledge the collaboration with the University of Stellenbosch and the Center for Social Justice, as well as the other partners. I say this because this summit has become a vital space for reflection and renewal, and a moment each year when South Africa and the world are reminded that social justice is not a choice, but a condition for peace, human dignity, and sustainable development. And we were honored to have join us Mariam Baku Hassan, the first UN Global Advocate for Peace, who participated over the last 2 days in this conference and brought her creative storytelling, Gen Z storytelling, and youth engagement to the heart of the dialogue about what it means to fight for peace and justice across the continent. And indeed, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard already that the theme of this conference is very timely because it resonates deeply not only with the UN's mission and the Sustainable Development Goals, but also the spirit of World Food Day we commemorated yesterday and the upcoming second UN Summit for Social Development. And the Summit on Social Development that will be happening in Doha in early November calls on all nations to accelerate progress towards social inclusion, equity, and human well-being, the same goals that drive our work here in South Africa and the mission of the Government of National Unity. It is truly a reminder that development without justice is fragile, and peace without food security is unsustainable. And soberingly, with just under 35% of the SDG targets on track, and 1 in 5 Africans remaining undernourished, these figures remind us that poverty, injustice, and hunger are not simply about scarcity. It is really a question of access, as we've heard, of distribution, of governance, and of dignity. And this summit provides us with a pathway to addressing and overcoming all of this. It also takes place as South Africa leads the G20 presidency. And at the United Nations, we're truly appreciative as we accompany South Africa's leadership in elevating the voice and interests of Africa and the Global South, championing solidarity, equality, and sustainability as central pillars and organizing principles of a fairer world economy that does not stand in the way of Africa's transformation. And as President Ramaphosa and other leaders, including the United Nations Secretary General, have affirmed, food security is not merely an agricultural outcome. It is a foundation for human rights, peace, and stability. And the UN in South Africa remains steadfast in supporting government and other stakeholders, including the private sector, to build inclusive, resilient, and equitable systems. And we ensure that as we move forward and look at the World Summit on Social Development, South Africa continues to play its part in championing the necessary reforms and interventions that are needed. And the work of the center, and under the leadership of Professor Thuli Madonsela, meaningfully contributes to this process. And as I conclude, as I typically do, I am reminded by the words of the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who says that social justice is not an optional add-on, but as a core foundation for navigating today's crisis: climate change, inequality, conflict, and the changing world of work. And that any major transition, be it in terms of jobs, green economy, digital technology, must be embedded in justice to avoid deepening inequalities. That's why I call on the President and leaders from all sectors in the room to continue to champion a new era of social justice by strengthening enforceable legislation and food security and climate resilience interventions, to strengthen anti-corruption and accountability frameworks, and to reinforce national and subnational financing and partnerships for development interventions. It is crucial in doing so to ring-fence, increase, and rigorously monitor investments in social protection and food systems, and ensuring that every rand spent advances equality, dignity, and resilience across the country. And on behalf of the United Nations, I reaffirm our commitment to working alongside South Africa and all nations on the path towards equality, solidarity, and meaningful sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you very much to our partners for the messages of support. Can we clap for them once again, please? Ladies and gentlemen, just a reminder to please keep your phones on silent mode so that we don't interrupt the speakers when they are on the podium. Please help me welcome now the Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde, who will give us his message of support.
Molweni, Wamkilekile, Goeiemorgen, good morning. Thank you very, very much for the honor and privilege to be able to stand here today and say a few words. I've got so little time and so much to say. So, Mr. President, ministers, VC, Prof, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, let's get down to business today. I want to say that, and I apologize to the speechwriter who produced all this document for me, but as you sit here, your speech just goes out the window and you change. This is where we start, or this in front of me is where we start. And to the VC, I want to say thank you very much. That message of partnership, working together, because quite frankly, we still work in silos. And we have to change that. So in actual fact, the wording on the front of this podium or on this document should rather say not just social justice, food security, and peace. It should say a partnership towards social justice, food security, and peace. And then, that says what we've got to change. Let's break those silos. But then, you see the seventh. So I sat there and I thought to myself, and we've heard, 30 years in, we've heard 2030 targets. 30 comes up quite often. And so what will the 30th, whatever platform this be, look like? And hopefully, the 30th is going to be the celebration of social justice, the celebration of food security and peace. because we need to be working towards that target every single day. Let's break the silos and let's get to work, get things done. And perhaps the last thing I wrote on the front of my document, or two things I wrote, the Musa plan, I like pronouncing it in Afrikaans rather, it's a Musa plan, because we've got to get this done. We've got to get it done, and it's got to be a big plan that pulls us all together to make sure that next year we can report back on a dashboard that says it's better than this year. And I'm sorry to say that unfortunately that is not the truth. It is not getting better, it is actually getting worse. Since the pandemic, we saw a step change in the wrong direction, and that surely has to change. I reflected on this very building for the last 2 days. We've heard that we've celebrated World Food Day. We've also had solar and storage conference happening down here at the moment as we speak. And when I leave here, I'm going to go across. I've got ministers from the UAE with our national department and our provincial department of agriculture. Those ministers in the UAE are here to talk about what? Food security. Engaging with us on economic opportunities, which we absolutely welcome, but so that they can sustain their own food security, get things done. In our government, we actually have a minister now in my government, in my cabinet, who is beyond her mandate of her portfolio. She is tasked as the lead minister on food security in our government. And I'll tell you about one or two of the projects just now. But I also have a saying in our government. I have a saying that says, nothing stops a bullet like a job. Nothing puts food on your table like a job. And nothing gives you dignity like a job. And that's why our apex priority is growth and jobs. That is our apex priority. But at the same time as you're focusing on this priority, you've got to make sure that that net is in place to make a difference to those citizens who are the most vulnerable in our society. And we will pump because at the moment in agriculture specifically, it is a major job creator in our province. But of course, agriculture and how much of that food that we produce goes to waste in the process and doesn't get to spaces that is desperately needed. And that comes back to the front page, because the one last thing I said, and part of our discussion earlier on before this meeting, was what about the data? And are we measuring things properly? And is that giving us the proper heat maps of where to zoom in and how to make a difference? Because government is delivering food to the most vulnerable. We've got wastage in an agricultural system where food is not getting to the most vulnerable. We've got NPOs and NGOs who do an outstanding and amazing job, who deliver tons of food every single day to the most vulnerable. Who's getting more meals than they should be getting a day, and who's being missed out? Where are those heat maps, and what is the data telling us? And because the silos are not working together, we're not actually getting the data together, and we're not moving the needle. Also in this very room, not in this very room, in this very building, yesterday was the Sustainability G20 meeting of 20 nations talking about the sustainability and climate change impact on our planet. But that was happening in a silo in the other side of this building. I know that we spoke about it today already. How do we bring those together? Climate change is a massive issue for us here on the African continent, a massive issue. And of course, we are being expected to pay for it as well, when we didn't cause it. This continent is responsible for 3% of climate change, or the carbon gases that are affecting climate change in this world. 3%. But watch, we're going to be charged carbon border taxes on our exports that get sent to the countries that actually caused the majority of those carbon taxes. We have to fight for that, and we've got to make sure that that in turn also gives us the change that we need on our continent. In that meeting yesterday, I spoke about the 600 million people in our continent who don't have electricity. But we've got to keep the oil, the gas, and the coal in the ground to play our part in climate change. Who's going to actually provide that power? Who's going to pay for it? But at the same time, it's not only the 600 million people without electricity, it's the 400 million people without water and the 300 million people that don't have food security on this continent. 300 million people don't have food security on this continent. What are we doing about it? How are we getting things done? And we've all got our responsibilities. And I know I'm also restricted by time, and I said I've got so much to say. What I want to say is I want to tell you about some of the responses. We heard the meals that the university gives to our students. In our province, our education system gives 500,000 meals to learners in this province every single school day. 500,000. But what happens to those children on Saturday and Sunday? Or in the school holidays? Are they in that data heat map in the same place where the most hungry people and the most vulnerable people are? Is that not a system to take home a weekend pack? That's what our Minister of Food Security is busy looking at the moment. How do we make sure we get the biggest impact with the easiest system of delivering a change or moving the needle? But that very same minister, looking at some of the data in our policy unit, worked out that there's 45% of our citizens in the province and in the country who don't have food in the full month. 45%. Nearly half of the citizens in our country don't have food for a whole month. But within that category, there's something that's even way worse. And it's called stunting. And stunting is getting worse in our country. And stunting is getting worse in this province. Stunting is when a child is born underweight and does not get the required nutrition to get that child's weight to the right space where it should be in its growing trajectory of those first 1,000 days. So we've started with an intervention. It's a partnership, Mr. VC. It is a partnership between a retailer, Shoprite Checkers, between an NGO, the DG Murray Trust, our policy unit in the Premier's department, and our Department of Health. When we pick up a mother at a clinic who is underweight, and we know the child's going to be underweight, automatically they get a credit card. That credit card gives them 9 high-protein nutritional items that they can go and get every single month at ShopRite. And we measure then the weight of the mother and the weight of the child. And for those first few months that the child is born, the child gets high-protein, high-nutritional product through that card. It's called Khulisa Care. And stunting is a problem across our continent and our world. I think that in this space, we are busy with a project that I hope is going to create a step change. This is about how you get things done. And perhaps, I said to you, it's a retailer, an NPO, and a government, but there's no university linked to it. We should have a university linked to it so the M&E is being done so that if it works, we massify this and we end a scourge that is probably one of the biggest drivers to setting people up to fail. Because a child who is born stunted and it doesn't get rectified, that child is set up to fail forever. Because their brain is not forming when it should be formed. They drop out of school. They end up in gangsterism and crime. They never make it to Stellenbosch University. And let's fix that right where the problem starts. Let's get it fixed there. So that's the first point. Of course, we also do a whole lot of other stuff. Every year we put 2,500 food gardens in place. We do the programs around what I've said with school feeding. We've just launched Khulisa Care. We've got a whole lot of other projects that are delivered by government and by civil society, but we need to bring them all together, map them, and see that we are moving the needle towards celebrating food security in our province, in our country, and on our continent. And I'm going to leave you with a last message. And yesterday I was speaking with our top management team about governance, innovation, and culture. Because sometimes we find it so hard to land things in government. And I was talking about how you can get on a MyCity bus, but you can't tap your phone. You can get on a Go George bus, but you can't tap your phone. I've said, I want to be able to tap my phone or my card. We find it so difficult to bring about these changes. I always joke with them, you've got to get on you've got to call an Uber, go down to the City Hall or OK Bazaars and you go and top up your phone, get the Uber back to the bus stop so you can catch the bus. No, we can't do that. But let me tell you about food security and some innovation that just blew my mind. I was driving down to a meeting somewhere along the promenade, and I stopped and filled up my car with fuel. And when I did that, I took the last cash out of my wallet and gave it to the petrol pump attendant. And when I got to the meeting, I got out of the car, and as I got out of the car, a man came up to me who's obviously food insecure. He's actually roof insecure as well. We all know people that we see them every single day. They really are battling. And he said to me, "Sorry, sir, have you got any change for me? I'm really hungry." And I said to him, I feel so bad. I really am sorry. And I promise you, I've got no money in my wallet. I gave the last cash to the petrol pump attendant. And he looked at me and he said, "No problem, snap scan." And as I took out my phone, he said to me, "And if you make it 120 Rand, I get a meal for a week at the shelter." How's that for an innovation? Now we need to think more innovatively. We need to enable private sector to come up with solutions, because government can't do it alone, citizens can't do it alone, private sector can't do it alone, universities can't do it alone. Let's do this together. Let's make sure we commit to making the difference and moving the needle, so that in the 7th iteration of this coming together, it can be a celebration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Premier. Ladies and gentlemen, we are really pressed for time, so without any further ado, to introduce the President, please help me welcome on stage Minister Inkosi Mzamo Buthelezi, the Minister of Public Service and Administration.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Mr. Manyathela, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, Deputy Minister Nel, Honorable Premier Wendy for the Western Cape, Professor Thuli Madonsela, all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. You will all agree with me that this 7th Social Justice Summit, under the overarching theme of social justice, food security, and peace, pathways to equality, solidarity, sustainability, and climate change, quote unquote, is taking place at a very opportune time, and there's no one appropriate enough to have addressed this gathering but the leader I'm about to introduce. In doing so, I'm not simply fulfilling matters of protocol, but I'm doing so because he deserves this kind of introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor and profound privilege to reflect briefly as I introduce His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of the Republic of South Africa. President Ramaphosa is a leader whose story continues to mirror the very complex yet hopeful narrative of our nation. He is indeed an activist of social justice. Through both activism and discipline, as he studied law at the University of the North, now known as University of Limpopo. In 1991, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa was elected the Secretary General of at the first National Conference of the African National Congress after its unbanning. Those who understand the ANC's structural architecture will understand that he was the engine and the brain behind all the party's strategic and leadership directions, thus paving a way into a new democratic dispensation. President Ramaphosa's life is a true testament of the balance between conviction and compromise. From the negotiating table of our democratic transition to the highest office in the land, he has carried with him resilience and a deep sense of national duty. President Ramaphosa was the head of the ANC's negotiation team at the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, CODESA, and the subsequent multi-party talks leading to the first democratic elections. President Ramaphosa was a member of parliament and served as the chairperson of the Constitutional Assembly, overseeing the writing of the 1996 Constitution, the very constitution that is well-renowned and anchored on social justice, equality, and freedom. Hence, I said there is no one befitting to address this gathering than himself, because he is an embodiment of what we are about here today. Grounded in humanity and humor that is often subtle, President Ramaphosa understands that even and specifically in politics, a light heart can and is able to carry a heavy load. I'm introducing a visionary leader, not a demagogue, a leader whose journey is a masterclass of diplomacy and negotiation. In 2010, President Ramaphosa became the Deputy Chairperson of the National Planning Committee that drafted a long-term national development plan for this country. And in 2014, he was appointed the Deputy President of South Africa, and later, in 2018, he was sworn in as the President of the Republic of South Africa, a journey laced in sacrifice, sweat, and blood. I'm introducing to you President Ramaphosa, who is the current President of the group of 20 wealthiest countries in the world, which will later be hosted for the first time on African soil. Even the choice of the theme for his presidency, which is equality, solidarity, and sustainability, speaks to the very profound values and embodies, or speaks to the very profound values he embodies and he lives. As he is about to take to the podium, I invite all of us to draw from the same well of calm, determination, and thoughtful leadership of His Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to invite His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa to deliver a keynote address before this summit. Mr. President.
Thank you. Let's be seated, please. Program Director, Premier of the Western Cape, Mr. Alan Winde, Minister Nkosi Buthelezi, and other ministers who are here present. Professor Thuli Madonsela, who has very, very kindly invited me to be present at this occasion, for which I thank you. The Vice Chancellor of the University of Stellenbosch, Professor Deresh Jamjugareth, Director of various departments who are part of this university, representatives of various organizations, including the United Nations, members of the judiciary who may be here, and representatives of business and academia and guests, and ladies and gentlemen, and my sister, Newton King, whom we used to work together when she was a top-class business person controlling a lot of money, up to R1 trillion on the stock exchange. Now she has turned social. And of course, the young people who stood up here, and one of them said something that I'm often called, which I never respond to because I don't know what it means. But I now have a response to them. When they say that, I say to them, eat cake. And our program director, and thank you for not dimming the lights. I think dimming the lights might have excited you a lot because you were there in Washington when the lights were dimmed, and you asked President Trump a lot of questions in those dimmed lights. You found it quite exciting, didn't you? But it was a joy to see South African journalists there and having the temerity and the bravery to ask big leader like President Trump those difficult questions, even though you inverted those questions to us. Allow me to begin by thanking the Center for Social Justice at Stellenbosch University and the United Nations, and indeed the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, for organizing this 7th Social Justice Summit. Your summit's theme of social justice, food security and peace, and attaching to that, those being pathways to equality, solidarity, sustainability, and climate resilience. This summit could not have come at the right moment. It's very timely, particularly in view of the fact that we are hosting the G20. A number of the issues that you have identified for discussion and dialogue are cogent issues that need to be addressed even at that level. A question could be asked, what do we mean by social justice? And it can be said that this concept of social justice is possibly essentially a political, a philosophical, and a social process that aims to ensure that there is equitable distribution of wealth, of opportunities, of privileges and resources within a society. And if you put that meaning across and then you begin to dissect it into its various component parts that affect the lives of people, you possibly come to understand what social justice is. Your summit's theme is very much aligned to our country's National Development Plan 2030, which was adopted, as you might recall, by Parliament in February of 2013. The NDP's central goal is to foster social justice, eliminate poverty, and reduce inequality by 2030. Now, the NDP set a direct commitment to social justice principles of equity and human rights, and frames social justice as not as a privilege, but as a right for all citizens. Now, this year, 2025, is when the countdown clock to 2030 begins to run in earnest. And this is when, as South Africans, we begin to see whether by 2030 we will have achieved some of those goals and objectives that we set for ourselves in the National Development Plan. This deadline we set as a country is for meeting the aspirations of the NDP. Countries around the world have also committed themselves to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, in other words, by 2030. So we've been working in unison with various countries in the world. In other words, we are not mad. We are working together with others. What we know is that progress towards achieving both the NDP and the SDGs, as the United Nations Secretary General says, is way off the mark. Completely way off the mark. There are some, however, aspects of those goals that may be said to be on track. But when you look at the totality, both globally as well as here at home, we are off the mark. The 10-year review of the NDP showed that despite considerable gains, underline considerable gains, in the main, there remains a wide gap between ambition and delivery in critical areas. With respect to this SDGs, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned that with so many global targets not being met or having even regressed, the promise of the SDGs risks fading into obscurity. That is the danger that the SG of the United Nations sees. In both instances, there has been recommendations of urgent course correction. And I do hope, given the fact that on a number of issues, for our own NDP, which in the main also addresses the theme that you have dealt with, I do hope that in your deliberations, you will have dealt with what I call course correction. It is our earnest wish that this important summit you're holding has gone into the granular detail of what this entails, how it can be done, and what sustainable outcomes can be secured. While the NDP's vision is deeply rooted in social justice, its implementation has faced a number of challenges, highlighting the gap between policy and practice. Some of the challenges are exemplified by a number of reports that have come forth, some from the Statistician General, some from surveys that have been conducted by a number of institutes, and some even possibly that have been conducted by this university. And some have been encapsulated in your MUSA plan. The Statistician General's statistics show that many people continue to experience inadequate and severely inadequate access to one of the key issues that you highlight in your theme, food. Severe acute malnutrition remains a challenge. It is most worrying when we continue to hear that malnutrition is increasing in a number of areas in our country, in the Eastern Cape and a number of other areas. And yet, at the same time, we've embarked on one of the biggest social welfare programs on our continent, spending up to 61% of our budget going to social welfare for 62 million people. Despite a range of interventions being implemented by various departments, particularly the Department of Health and Social Development, cases have increased by approximately 26% over the past 5 years. At a global level, countries are being confronted with the dire effects of hunger, food insecurity, and the associations with climate change. Freedom from hunger is both a moral as well as a developmental imperative. I'm rather glad that, much as you're dealing with social justice broadly, you have narrowed it down to an important issue of food and the impact that other determinants have on the issue of food security. Food is recognized as a universal right under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in our own Bill of Rights. The right of everyone to have access to sufficient food and water, and the duty imposed on the state to take reasonable legislative and other measures within its available resources to progressively realize this right is in itself a credit to our constitutional order. Now, our country is one of only approximately 29 countries in the world whose constitution explicitly enshrines the right to food and water. We are amongst the few outliers when it comes to this. We are also one of the only countries where citizens can take legal action to ensure that this right is enforced. So, students at a university who may find that NSFAS is not providing their meal allowance can literally take the government to court and win in a court and enforce the government to make sure that that meal allowance is paid to them. We are the only country that enables that to happen in the world. This therefore confers on us a particular responsibility to ensure that it's not just an aspirational goal, but a directive to be implemented. South Africa has adopted a multifaceted approach to tackle hunger and food security that I will briefly deal with. The first is reforming policy and legal frameworks. These include the Integrated Food Security Strategy, the National Food and Nutrition Security Plan, and the Nutrition Policy Implementation Plan. These policies have enabled us to implement a series of programs to deliver nutrition and food directly through educational, community, as well as institutional systems. The most far-reaching of these has been the National School Nutrition Program. It has been in existence since the birth of our democracy. Now, this scheme feeds more than 9.7 million learners. Premier Winde, correctly so, says it feeds in this province 500,000 children every day. But nationally, it is 9.7 million every day for 5 days or 20 days in a week, in a month. But the key question, as he correctly asks, what happens over the weekend? What happens during school holidays? What happens during public holidays? That is the question that I do hope your deliberations would have covered, and I do hope is covered in Musa as well. A number of studies have shown that the program that we have, which is the school nutrition program, that its positive impact on learner attendance and concentration and academic performance on young people is quite impactful. Put into perspective even further, when one is quantifying longer-term impact. Last year, learners from quintile 1 to 3 schools accounted for 67% of the bachelor passes that we got in matric. Now, these learners who now have the opportunity to go on to achieve their dreams will have had 12 full years of nutrition support at school through this program. And we have added on to this nutrition delivery and said it must be now 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch, because as children come to school in the morning, they invariably never have had breakfast at home. They must therefore get breakfast and lunch. Now, I know you all have your breakfast and lunch every day, but many of these children don't. So when we say this, when I say this in community meetings, they applaud. Please applaud as well. I say so advisedly because this is a real impactful change. When we started the program, and when Nelson Mandela started the program in 1994, he ruled that all children must be fed at school, and that was just for lunch. Now, in our era, term of this administration, we've said we want another meal to be added. And we're beginning to see real results. At the same time, we also see that their caregivers have been further supported by a basket of pro-poor measures, such as social grants, free basic services, and free primary health care themselves. Without a shadow of doubt, the school nutrition program is one of the most transformative pro-poor and pro-development policies to have emanated from our democratic dispensation. And as I go around our continent and meet a number of heads of states in various countries, when I ask what programs they have, I find that this one is truly an outlier, in that to feed almost 10 million children every day is something that is unheard of on our continent. It is more than just a support system. It is a strategic effort to promote a healthier and more educated future. But whilst we are doing all this, we should be concerned, and we are concerned, about the reports of malnutrition, as I said, but also the reports of stunting, as Premier Winde alluded to. I have said I'd like to know, I must get a report on why this is occurring, why this is on an upward trend. Why should we, in a country that is ostensibly food secure, with all these wonderful food delivery chains and production systems, have stunting, have malnutrition? And of course, that is driven by a whole number of other factors, such as poverty and unemployment. Across the country, we have provincially managed programs to support food production in the form of, yes, backyard food gardens. We speak about this, but I want to see more and more of these. I want, in a way, to see a revolution of food production in the backyards of where our people live. We need to be invigorating this and seeing more and more people producing food and relying on that food. Provincial agriculture departments are providing seedlings, tools, and other farming implements to enable people and organizations to feed themselves. Thirdly, we have prioritized nutrition at a primary health level through initiatives such as breastfeeding, promotion, micronutrient supplementation for pregnant women, and the National Obesity Strategy. Now, since 2003, we have also implemented a mandatory food fortification program for staple foods such as wheat and maize to combat micronutrient deficiencies and improve nutrition. And fourthly, we have leveraged fiscal and market-based measures to improve food affordability. Now, since 1991, we have implemented a zero rating of the basic food basket to support low-income households, and the list continues to expand. Even as we were dealing with the budget this year and looking at what impact VAT would have, we started looking at how can we expand non-vettable food items so that our people don't have to continue adding up a 15% on the price of food that they find at the till. In 2018, we began implementing a healthy promotion levy on sweetened beverages to support efforts to decrease diabetes, obesity, and related diseases. The Competition Commission has proven to be a valuable tool in support of better health outcomes. And I want to raise this particularly as one of the themes of this summit is the whole question of promoting accountability. Since 2007, the Commission has conducted a number of inquiries to enforce fairness and accountability in food markets. Examples of this include the bread and milling cartel cases, the grocery retail market inquiry that took place, and the fresh produce market inquiry. So you have the Competition Commission getting involved in looking at issues of food pricing as well as ensuring that there's food security in our country. Now, by identifying anti-competitive prices, or practices rather, that inflate food prices, this work is directly contributing to a fairer food system. Reduced retail food prices make basic and nutritious foodstuffs more affordable for low-income households. Now, I was very pleased to hear that you've had retailers such as Woolworths coming here, and possibly ShopRite and Checkers and all of them. These companies are very good distributors of our food, good retailers, and almost second to none when you look at the architecture of food distribution on our continent. However, they're making billions and billions of profits, of money. And if we are talking about food prices, we want to call on them to look at the prices that they charge for food at the till. And we also want to call on them to look at the high margins that they charge. Because it's all very well for them to say, there needs to be food security, there needs to be affordable food prices, but they are the ones who drive the high food prices, and they are the ones who must join us in taking action to reduce food prices. We want them, and we want them to join us when it comes to reducing the cost of living. Food prices is what drives the cost of living higher all the time, including, of course, the prices that we pay for various other municipal services. So this has to be a collective action by all of us, government, business, civil society, academia, and everyone. We need to have a comprehensive approach to looking at how we ensure that there is true food security and affordable food prices for the people of our country. It is part of ensuring that the economy itself is not militating against the rights of citizens to affordable and nutritious food. Since 2020, this Commission has also been monitoring essential food pricing to identify market inefficiencies that have resulted in the burden of being passed to the poor household all the time. Finally, the state continues to leverage income and livelihood support and mechanisms to enable households to access decent nutrition. The social grant system is simply a lifeline for millions of South Africans who rely on their grants to feed themselves and their families. About 18 million of them monthly do get their grants. You add the 9 million children who receive food every day at school, and you add the social disaster relief, then you are talking about way above 30-something million people every day who rely on the South African state. The impact of social grants on supporting nutrition cannot be underestimated. there is a vast body of research from government as well as civil society organizations backing up the assertion that grants are associated with a better nutrition and lower food insecurity. The National Income Dynamics Study, the Coronavirus Rapid Mobile Survey, known as the NIDS CRAM survey, found that the Social Relief of Distress, SRD, well, I call it the 350 Rand grant introduced during COVID-19, reduced the number of people below the food poverty line by 2 million in 2021. Now, studies from the Department of Social Development show that the overwhelming majority of SRD recipients spend the grant on food. The Department of Agriculture is leading implementation of the National Food and Nutrition Security Plan to coordinate national actions towards food security. Now, we've got a number of other programs, the ILIMA, the ILITSIMA program. One outstanding economist, Wandile Sihlobo, is the one who puts his proper finger on this by saying that the right to access to sufficient food and water is an important aspect of the work that we have to do. And through the agro-processing master plan, we're also implementing the drive towards food system transformation. In addition, the introduction of farming input vouchers under the presidential employment stimulus enabled almost 250,000 beneficiaries to receive training and vouchers to grow nutritious food crops. The Department of Science, Technology and Innovation is working with agricultural departments to promote growing underutilized species of crops like amaranth, African leafy vegetables, and Bambara groundnuts. Now, nutrition-rich varieties are being developed, and traditional processing methods such as the fermentation and drying are being refined utilizing modern science. Now, across the country, we see inspiring examples of indigenous knowledge-based systems or enterprises that are being utilized to ensure that we can have food security working together with scientific research institutions. Now, these efforts will play what I would say an invaluable role in climate change adaptation and mitigation, precisely one of the themes that are part of your overall general theme. Indigenous knowledge systems can and must play a key role in supporting nutrition as we deal with the impacts of droughts, of fires, and floods. Climate change is one of those issues that we are going to be dealing with at the G20 summit. Engaging world leaders to focus on climate change as it impacts countries in the global south, but more particularly countries on the African continent. We speak constantly about finding African solutions to African problems, and I hope this summit will have devoted time and attention to the issue of how indigenous knowledge systems can aid nutrition support. Now, the great paradox of the world today is that whilst global food production is sufficient to meet demand, millions still go hungry. Conflict, climate change, biodiversity loss, and developing country debts are further weakening global and local food systems, as are inadequate access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. And all these militate against the concept of social justice, which is what your conference or your summit is all about. What this means is that even in as much as we have made progress as developing countries and as South Africa in improving the health outcomes of our people, there is much more that needs to be done. The medium-term development plan that we have adopted is clear that food security is central to reducing poverty, improving human development, and also ensuring that there is social justice. Its first target is to reduce the proportion of South Africans living below the food poverty line from 30.9% in 2022 to 25% by 2029. Secondly, it is to reduce the number of individuals vulnerable to hunger from 5.4 million to below 2.9 million over the same period. Now, to achieve these medium-term development goal aspirations or targets over the remaining period of 4 years of this administration, government, working together with key role players in our society, will have to prioritize a coordinated set of strategic interventions. And this is where your effort comes in, and this is where the Musa plan also comes in. These interventions should include regularly reviewing the national minimum wage to match inflation, reviewing the indigent policies to ensure that communities have more money in their pockets to buy decent food, diversifying food security programs, and expand the social welfare net. So this summit should galvanize the effort by everyone towards ensuring that no household goes to bed hungry. One household that suffers from the tyranny of hunger is one too many. I am encouraged by the global solidarity in our efforts to ensure universal food security. And we also recognize the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty that was established against the Brazilian G20 presidency to advocate for reform for global food governance to better reflect the needs of the Global South. The G20 Ministerial Food Security Task Team declaration affirms that the right to food is a fundamental human right and that all nations share a collective responsibility to build resilient and sustainable food systems. Now, this has been a very important declaration. You see, right at the beginning of our G20 process, we said we are going to have 130 meetings, and we've now come down to about 130, I see, or a little bit more. But in a number of those meetings, the ministerial G20 consultations end up with declarations. And this is one of the important declarations that is now going to be uplifted and taken to the Leaders' Summit when all the heads of state come here in November. Now, so this is a very important development. Now, its principles resonate deeply with our values as South Africa, which are encapsulated in the spirit of Ubuntu, meaning that I am because you are. And in this regard, I need and I have to congratulate my colleagues who are ministers, various officials, but more importantly, congratulate many of you as social partners who've been playing a key role in a number of these iterations and meetings, who are enabling all these declarations to stack up and be added on to the list of issues that are now going to go into the composite declaration that will come from the Leaders' Summit. Now, achieving equality, solidarity, and sustainability in food systems requires partnerships. It demands that we put evidence to work. It demands that we act together, collectively, across government, business, and civil society, academia, to ensure that freedom from hunger becomes a lived reality for every South African. It should concern us deeply that there are South Africans who go to bed hungry, South Africans who rise from bed with empty stomachs. It should concern us that there are South Africans who find it difficult to find food, to eat, to survive. It should concern us all. And it is for that reason that all of us collectively should put hands together and find ways of taking this task on. So I want to applaud Professor Madonsela and many of you who are working in various institutions for the work that you do. The Musa plan, for me, is quite inspiring. And I'd like to thank you for having come up with that plan, and a number of you for what you do as the private sector and as non-governmental organizations. So I urge this summit to reaffirm the conviction that social justice cannot exist in the absence of hunger. Let it remind us that the realization of the right to food is not only a measure of policy success, but it is a test of our collective conscience. It should be a test of our collective conscience. And food should never be used as a weapon, as we have seen in other conflicts in the world. There are conflicts that are going on where food and nutrition is now being used against other populations. Now Israel has been accused by UN experts and humanitarian organizations of weaponizing food in Gaza by restricting access to essential supplies, but much worse, by destroying agricultural infrastructure and contributing to famine-like conditions. Now, we need to imprint this on our memory, that never again should food ever be used as a weapon against those that we may not like. And it should never happen on our continent or anywhere in the world. Food is a universal right. It is therefore, it's important for us to embrace the principle of food being a human right, and a human right that should never be diluted, and a human right that is irrevocable. Food is about life, and life is important, and our human rights should continue to protect the life of everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 seconds before we release the president, Mr. President, apologies, but can I please request you to come back on the podium with Professor Madonsela? They've got a gift for you from a young artist by the name of Yanga, who is from Kukuletu. They'll present it here and we'll take some pictures on the podium. Is Yanga here? Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, we will release the President and take a 15-minute comfort break to allow for the President to leave. Please don't leave the venue if you don't need to, because we'll be starting with our first plenary panel in a few minutes. Can we all rise as we release the President, please?